Hey, welcome to Millennial Man, the 13th floor, chapter 15, Learning and Training. Learning and training is a subject worthy of close consideration, especially for the Millennial Man. All men and women should know about and understand learning and training, and realize how essential these are for an efficient and orderly life and preparing our youth and future generations. Unfortunately, in America, it doesn't take much learning and training to survive or to just exist because of the ease of survival, making a living, attaining food, high comfort levels, time of peace, and people in perpetual states of pleasuring themselves. Because this is true, things of great importance go unnoticed or taken for granted, this subject being one of them. Too many of us have been merely surviving and existing instead of living efficiently and orderly as learned and trained men, impacting our homes, community, and nation for good. Our purpose now as millennial men is to reverse this trend and to attain a realization of what it is to learn and to train and to take this knowledge to our community. The earliest examples of learning and training we can all wrap our heads around are the realities involved in the care of infant children. I'm aware that most of you reading this have at least a partial understanding of what is required in rearing, teaching, and training our children. A lot of time and effort is spent caring for them. The first thing an infant learns is to cry when hungry or uncomfortable. Then they learn to use their hands. At some point, most babies learn that if they want to keep the milk flowing, they have got to hold on to the bottom. Babies then learn to crawl, walk, talking, and using the toilet. These things take a little more training, and the more time we spend training, the faster and more efficiently they learn. A different level of training and learning is required once our children begin to venture out of the home. The things we teach and train them will vary depending on our knowledge, character, beliefs, and where we live. It will not be the same for a rural farm community as it is in the inner cities of Detroit or Chicago. The cultures are different and the dangers are different, and survival may require a different awareness in the different places. Granted, some places are quite difficult and more extreme than others. However, no matter where we are, the need for all manner of training and learning exists. What we want to avoid is teaching and training the minimum requirement for survival and neglecting the important topics of learning in psychological, physical, and spiritual areas. We need to be actively involved in teaching and training our children until they leave our care and beyond. There is a balance to be maintained and a few things we need to avoid, things that cause real disadvantages. One being teaching our children that they are victims of circumstances or that they are not worthy of greatness because of race or social standing. Our children believe what we tell them. People who feel they are victims generally stay in a state of inaction and negative attitudes. We have no room for that as millennial men. All of us have potential to succeed and benefit from learning and hard work, and we need to teach this truth with abandon. Another thing to avoid is coddling children too much, always completing tasks for them instead of allowing them to build skill sets. Also trying to keep them from any and all potential dangers, even of minimal nature. Danger is a real part of life. As parents and guardians, we hate to see the children we care for upset, hurting, or struggling in any way, so we naturally want to alleviate any pressures or dangers. Unfortunately, this can train and teach dependency and weakness. Surely we want our future generations to learn problem-solving skills and independence so that they can grow into dependable, compassionate, strong leaders and teachers. There's not going to always be someone there to complete our task or solve our problems. We need to learn and teach to take initiative ourselves. This starts with our training and teaching them early on. As millennial men, we will do our best, whatever the situation we find ourselves in. We will be men of knowledge and action. Another thing to look out for in this area of teaching and training is to be careful to never give our children, or the children we are caring for or working with, the impression that we feel they are a burden or that we dread caring for them. This can be quite harmful. Children pick up on our emotions and attitudes like little sponges, so be aware of how you act around them. This is a big part of proper teaching and training, learning to really value opportunity with them in learning and training. When we do this, they will pick up on our attitude. Nothing is like a child knowing they have value and are very important to you. We all know caring for infants and small children is a huge burden and requires almost all of our time to raise them properly. This is why it should be taken seriously before you father children. There comes a time when a child can be left in front of a television, computer, video games, and to themselves with toys. This gives the parent or guardian or caregiver some space or free time. Certainly, it's a relief after spending a year or two in intense involvement caring for the child. It can be tempting to leave them to the television or games more and more as we start to slack in our responsibility to teach and train. As time goes on, we get involved in other things with work, school, daycare, social media, and all the cares of this life, etc. We have allowed the space between our children and ourselves to grow wide. This break in our intense involvement and training becomes more than is healthy. Everyone will suffer from this, especially children and the community. Men, even if we are dead bone tired, we have a duty to spend time in teaching and training our children. Even though they, our children, have a small ability to survive on their own, we still need to be intensely involved in training and teaching them. Some of us believe too, whether consciously or subconsciously, that the mere survival of our child is all that is required of us as fathers or guardians. Example given: food, clothing, shelter, shoes, transportation to government institutions, schools, etc. Why we believe this is all that is required needs to be figured out with each individual. Whether it be laziness, lack of understanding, or selfishness, whatever the reasons we have been leaving the teaching and training, fathering of our children to television, social media, single mothers, failed Department of Education unions, where horrible teachers can be fired, and the streets. Bringing a human being into the world is a very serious and time-consuming endeavor and must be handled responsibly. This may seem like an unimportant or small matter to some, but I believe the psychological impact on all involved has very deep and long-lasting implications and consequences. I am certain it can be attributed to a lot of our failures as a society, and if not addressed immediately, will contribute to the continued division and fall of freedom. We are not really grasping the importance and need of maintaining a long, steady flow of teaching and training in order for our children to be well equipped with knowledge and ability in life's issues. My question to you, millennial men, is how have we gotten to this point of disconnection from our children, our homes, our communities? Seriously, how? Why? This disconnection has multifaceted origins and consequences. Here we are as adults, and unfortunately a lot of us are unlearned and untrained in these things that matter. We are trained in mediocrity and failure, dysfunctional living, and selfishness. The only explanation that rings with truth is the lack of learning and training and being learned and trained in the wrong things. Oh, how difficult it is to relearn or retrain someone in adulthood, unless they are open and eager for change and real knowledge. This is one reason the military recruits the youth, because oftentimes adults can have chips on their shoulders from emotional or psychological weaknesses, and they hate to admit failure and have inferiority complexes. Adults often become stuck in their ways and will not yield. Can you attest to this fact? It is not easy to admit that we've possibly learned wrong, It is not possible. It is not easy to admit that we've possibly learned wrong, or that we've learned or been trained in failure. We don't want to blame those we love who raised us. As with anything, learning and training included, it starts with recognition of a need or truth, and then actions to set in order how to use that truth for positive change and to figure out solutions to the problems. So, two things we need to emphasize. How important it is for us to be involved in the teaching and training of our children and our youth as a whole. Also, how to get ourselves into the learning and training we need in order to be successful and break the cycle of ignorance, division, and mass failure. Millennial men. If any of us expect the wrongs in this country to be set right, this realization is what we must get to. These issues are difficult, both physically and psychologically. We must be trained to bear it. Physical training, such as military, sports, hard labor, and such, all require drive, energy, pain, repetitions, and inspiration. It takes motivating factors, such as challenge and reward. Psychological training is not so cut and dry, but takes serious mental and emotional strength and effort. Being able to process all of life's circumstances and trials, whether good or bad, and still be able to maintain positive attitudes and positive growth is a challenge and ultimately is a matter of the amount of learning and training we have. We can better gain this by being a part of an education and aware community. Educated and aware community. Because we are in close proximity with one another, we can help one another. An ideal community is having work and life interests in common. Proper communities should be sharing burdens, even those of learning and training. If my neighbor has a son who has no father, I should help in that capacity. There is great advantage in being involved in one another's lives. There is also great advantages to having people you are accountable to so that you have that extra motivation to live good and make good decisions, knowing that if you don't, you'll have to answer to your community. Our system of government requires community and knowledge of the system's order and attention to it by the people in order to sustain it. Too often we don't understand totally how our lack of education and training in things concerning this system of freedom and governance actually impacts us and our world. Did you know that if we as men were more educated and involved in the governing of our nation, corrupt officials would have less influence? Someone has to govern when we refuse to. Unfortunately, too often it is money-hungry, power-drunk individuals that take advantage of our lack. These people put in time and effort to learn and train in order to attain these power positions. When will life be so important to you and to us so that we as millennial men do the same, giving it the same effort and attention? We use many excuses as to why we don't care to be involved, but none of them is sufficient or acceptable for a true millennial man. We are concerned about life and the well-being of society. We are not lazy, weak, or unable. We do want unity and justice. We love to learn and train because it means we gain more knowledge, strength, and ability. And then we can share it with others. Therefore, any excuses as to why we aren't involved and are not getting the learning and training we need is unacceptable. There has to come a moment when we say, enough is enough, I'm going to do it. Millennial men, most of us currently don't have the luxury of live-in drill sergeants, personal trainers, and motivational speakers. Our lives are not generally boot camps, schools, or seminars where we learn the things we need to know and how to accomplish real success and happiness. Unfortunately, the current institutions of learning are failing in the being a man department. A lot of our drive needs to be motivated from outside sources, such as books, movies, videos, music, public speakers or teachers and preachers, etc. These are all great ways to be inspired. These things simply spark a desire within each one of us that already exists. Inspiration is what I'm trying to accomplish by writing this book. I have found that the common sources of inspiration are often found lacking in truth and reality, as they teach how to simply seek a career or personal wealth, or how to obey the standard of political correctness, and how to kowtow to special interest groups or political party lines. These special interest groups are making the institutions of learning ineffective in a lot of areas because they aren't real enough and have nonsense agendas. Real men love real. Ultimately, we decide what we seek out, what we listen to daily, what we spend our valuable time doing, and what we dwell on mentally, spiritually, and physically. I've been working hard at all of these things, and I know it is not easy. The good news is There are advocates out there, people who sincerely want to help you and I do better. We just need to be serious about seeking out those who speak, support, and teach truth. Also, men, there are ways to overcome distraction and the deceptive psychological tricks at play to keep men as a whole weak and complacent. Men, we have to be willing to break the chains that bind us, shatter the curses that oppress us, and overcome the indulgences that keep us of no effect. We know what it is to spend time learning and training. Unfortunately, we are skilled in things that give us little more than our closed-minded, selfish desires and are lost to long-lasting success and peace. My agenda is to inspire you to become learned and trained in leadership and ability to control your own destiny by overcoming selfishness. To learn that fulfilling your natural role as men brings more than all riches of the earth to you and to those around you. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication to be skilled in anything, but especially to overcome the self-oppression we've become skilled at and have been instituting on ourselves. Let's get to it. Let us learn and train and then teach others to do the same. Then continue to be worthy teachers and trainers.